Hi there, and welcome back to LeanReads, the channel where we share powerful insights and personal growth lessons through great books, artificial intelligence, global instability, digital empires. We're living in an era where software is more powerful than soldiers. In the technological republic, two insiders from Palantir ask a haunting question: can America and the free world survive the age of technology it created? If you enjoy what you hear and want to dive deeper, we've included a link to the book in the description below. Now, let's get started. Published in 2024, The Technology Republic is a sharp and timely reflection on the fragile relationship between Silicon Valley's private innovation ecosystem and the broader national interests of the United States. Written by Alexander C. Karp, co-founder and CEO of Palantir Technologies, and Nicholas W. Zamiska, an analyst and journalist specializing in technology and policy. The book argues that while American tech companies continue to lead the world in consumer innovation, they are losing touch with the deeper mission of securing long-term societal resilience and national competitiveness. Karp and Zamiska raise a sobering question. Can a society obsessed with convenience still build the tools to defend itself? Drawing on their experience at the intersection of defense, intelligence, and technology, the authors explore the growing divide between the world of apps and entertainment and the world of strategic innovation, the kind of technology that determines whether nations thrive or falter in moments of crisis. At its core, the Technology Republic is not a criticism, but a call to realignment, a plea to rebuild the collaborative spirit that once defined America's technological rise, when government and private industry worked together toward shared national goals. Alexander C. Karp earned his PhD in social theory from Goethe University, Frankfurt, and is best known as the co-founder and CEO of Palantir Technologies, a company that builds software platforms for defense, intelligence, and complex data analysis. His essays often bridge philosophy, governance, and the ethics of artificial intelligence. Nicholas W. Zamiska is a journalist and policy analyst whose reporting spans global technology, economics, and security. His insights help contextualize Karp's ideas within the shifting geopolitical environment of the 21st century. In a world increasingly shaped by data and AI, the Technology Republic delivers a sobering message. When innovation drifts too far from collective responsibility, societies become more fragile, not more advanced. The authors remind us that many of the technologies we take for granted, from GPS to the internet itself, were born out of public-private collaboration driven by national purpose. The erosion of that partnership, they argue, could weaken not just American leadership, but the world's ability to respond to global instability. The book encourages readers, engineers, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and ordinary citizens to rethink what innovation means. It's not just about convenience or profit, but about building a society capable of enduring shocks in an unpredictable future. America's strategic recalibration in an age of uncertainty. In the summer of 1989, at the twilight of the Cold War, political scientist Francis Fukuyama published an essay that would capture the imagination of an era. In The End of History, he argued that the great ideological battles of the 20th century were nearing their conclusion. Liberal democracy and free market capitalism, he wrote, had triumphed as the most effective system for organizing society, marking the endpoint of humanity's ideological evolution. At the time, the Soviet Union had not yet collapsed. Eastern Europe was still under communist control. Yet Fukuyama's vision reflected a powerful optimism, the belief that liberal democracy would become the universal political framework for humanity. 3 decades later, that optimism feels distant. The reemergence of authoritarian powers, regional conflicts, and geopolitical fragmentation has made clear that history never ended. It merely entered a new, more unpredictable phase. From Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 to Iran's nuclear ambitions and the escalating tensions in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, the post-Cold War expectation of perpetual peace has dissolved. As Russian forces advanced toward Kiev in 2022, Fukuyama himself called it the end of history, a striking admission that the universal consensus around liberal values had fractured. America's strategic dilemma. The question now confronting the West, and particularly the United States, is whether it can still sustain its leadership in an era of renewed strategic competition. While the NATO alliance remains robust, the conflict in Ukraine has exposed key vulnerabilities within the U.S. industrial and defense base. Analysts warn that the issue is no longer about money or morale, but about industrial endurance, the ability to maintain production in a protracted conflict. Some Pentagon assessments suggest that in the event of a large-scale war against a peer competitor, the United States could exhaust key munitions within weeks or even days. This paradox reveals a deeper truth. Despite commanding one of the largest defense budgets in history, America's industrial foundation for sustained warfare has eroded. The shrinking arsenal of democracy. To understand how this happened, one must look back to the post-Cold War restructuring of America's defense sector. During the Cold War, more than 50 major defense contractors contributed to U.S. military innovation. Today, that number has dwindled to just 5 dominant conglomerates. The once fluid ecosystem of dual-purpose industries, where companies like Ford could manufacture both cars and bombers, has given way to a rigid, standardized system focused on compliance rather than creativity. The triumph of liberal democracy in 1991 also brought complacency. The belief that the peace dividend would last indefinitely led to the downsizing of defense infrastructure and a cultural shift away from long-term preparedness. For decades, the U.S. economy pivoted towards services, software, and consumer technology, while industrial capacity, once the backbone of national strength, was quietly outsourced or allowed to decay. The result is a silent crisis, a nation whose technological genius remains unmatched, but whose ability to build at scale and speed has atrophied. The challenge of strategic adaptation. This is not just a logistical or military problem. It reflects a broader challenge of strategic orientation, the capacity of a society to recognize when the assumptions guiding it no longer hold. The U.S. faces a new kind of competition, one that blends economic resilience, technological dominance, and societal cohesion. Yet, the reflexes of its political and industrial systems remain shaped by an earlier age of certainty. To thrive in this new software, the new heart of national defense. In 1942, American theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer was appointed to lead Project Y, a top secret branch of the Manhattan Project located in the deserts of New Mexico. Its goal was unprecedented in scale and ambition: to build the world's first atomic bomb. For 3 relentless years, Oppenheimer and his team labored under extreme secrecy and pressure. They succeeded, creating a weapon that not only ended a world war, but fundamentally changed the trajectory of human history. During his security clearance interviews, Oppenheimer once remarked that when scientists are confronted with a technically sweet possibility, a discovery so compelling in its potential, they rarely stop to consider whether it should be done. They go ahead and do it, he said, and only later wonder how it will be used. That impulse, the drive to pursue knowledge first and deal with consequences later, birthed one of the most consequential technologies ever created. Yet, after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the summer of 1945, killing hundreds of thousands, Oppenheimer's tone changed. We have known sin, he reflected, acknowledging that the line between discovery and destruction had been irrevocably crossed. Even then, he justified the decision as a grim necessity. In 1939, Albert Einstein and other scientists had written to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that Nazi Germany was developing a similar weapon. The moral calculus had shifted. It was no longer a question of whether to build the bomb, but who would build it first. From the atomic age to the algorithmic era, today, humanity stands at the dawn of another transformative moment, one driven not by nuclear physics, but by artificial intelligence. If the atomic bomb redefined physical power, AI is redefining informational and cognitive power, the ability to perceive, predict, and decide at scales no human institution can match. This transition is forcing governments and militaries to rethink what national strength means in the 21st century. Power is no longer measured merely by missiles or soldiers, but by code, data, and algorithmic precision. Consider the F-35 fighter program, the most expensive weapons project in history, initiated in the 1990s and expected to remain a cornerstone of Western air power until the late 2080s. Yet, as AI systems advance, this assumption is being questioned. With the forgotten legacy of a technological power, who will write the software on which America's future, security, defense, and strategic influence will depend? For much of the 20th century, the answer was clear. It would come from the partnership between scientists, engineers, and the U.S. government, a collaboration that once defined the golden age of American innovation. This alliance not only gave birth to the modern tech industry, but also shaped the nation's role as a global leader in science and defense. Innovation, born from strategy. To understand the depth of this partnership, one only needs to look at 2 of the most transformative technologies in human history: GPS and the Internet. Both began as military projects funded by the U.S. Department of Defense to serve strategic needs. Only later were they released to civilian use, revolutionizing how people live, work, and connect across the planet. Without GPS, there would be no digital maps, fitness trackers, or autonomous tractors revolutionizing American agriculture. Without the internet, there would be no global connectivity, no e-commerce, no digital economy as we know it. These were not the results of isolated genius in a garage, but the product of a national ecosystem, a coordinated effort between public institutions and private ingenuity, bound by a shared sense of purpose, a tradition as old as the Republic. The relationship between the American state and science did not begin with the Cold War. It has existed since the birth of the Republic itself. Many of the founding fathers were not only statesmen, but also inventors. Thomas Jefferson designed sundials and experimented with agricultural techniques. Benjamin Franklin created the lightning rod, bifocal lenses, and an energy-efficient stove, each invention reflecting a practical desire to improve everyday life. Even leaders less involved in experimentation, like John Adams, recognized the importance of science as a public good. Though he cautioned that some research might drift too far from reality, he insisted that government should guide scientific work toward practical ends, especially in agriculture, then the foundation of American livelihood. This blend of idealism and pragmatism became a defining trait of American innovation. Discovery pursued not for its own sake, but to advance collective progress. When science and the state worked in unison throughout the 20th century, that partnership deepened. One of the clearest examples came in 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. The shock was immediate and profound. Within hours, President Dwight D. Eisenhower convened his top scientific advisors at the White House. From that meeting emerged a bold national plan that led to the creation of NASA, the agency that barely a decade later placed a human being on the moon. It was an extraordinary demonstration of what can happen when political will, scientific talent, and national purpose align. The space race wasn't just about rockets. It was about belief, the conviction that technology could embody freedom, ambition, and progress itself. The fracture of a historic partnership. Today, that shared sense of mission is fading. The collaboration that once powered both innovation and national resilience has weakened, precisely at a time when the world faces challenges no less consequential than those of Oppenheimer-Essa era. The issue is not a shortage of talent. America still possesses an unmatched reservoir of scientific and engineering brilliance. The problem lies in the moral struggle of Silicon Valley. When Swedish chemist and engineer Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, a stabilized form of nitroglycerin that was far safer to handle, he envisioned a tool for construction and mining, a breakthrough that could blast tunnels through mountains and reshape landscapes for progress. But the world had other plans. Governments quickly realized the weaponizing potential of his discovery. Dynamite became a new instrument of war, magnifying destruction on an industrial scale. Confronted with the fear of being remembered as a merchant of death, Nobel sought redemption through legacy. In his will, he created the Nobel Prizes to honor those whose work conferred the greatest benefit to humankind. Yet one part of his story is often forgotten. Nobel genuinely believed that the fear of destruction might prevent war. If conflict became too devastating to bear, he reasoned, rational actors would avoid it. This paradoxical idea that the power to destroy can sustain peace later became central to modern strategic thought. It found its most rigorous expression in the work of Thomas Schelling, the American game theorist and Nobel laureate, who called this logic the diplomacy of violence. In Schelling's view, destructive capability was not merely a tool of annihilation, but a form of bargaining power. Possessing the ability to inflict unacceptable damage could, paradoxically, preserve stability. Indeed, this principle defined the post World War II order. For decades, the mere existence of the U.S. nuclear arsenal deterred major conflicts, creating an uneasy but enduring peace from steel and gunpowder to code and cognition. In the 21st century, the foundations of deterrence are shifting. What once rested on steel, oil, and gunpowder is now being rewritten in software and algorithms. The next era of military power will not be measured in bombs or tanks, but in artificial intelligence, systems capable of perception, prediction, and decision making faster than any human chain of command. As nations from China to Russia accelerate their development of AI enabled weapons, the strategic balance of the world is being redrawn. Whoever leads in AI will not only dominate the future battlefield, but also define the moral and technological standards that shape the global order. Silicon Valley's crisis of conscience, ironically, at the very heart of this revolution. In Silicon Valley, home to the world's greatest concentration of technical genius, there is hesitation. Despite its unmatched talent and resources, the Valley's relationship with defense and government has become fraught. Many of its brightest engineers view military collaboration, the battle for a nation's soul. What is a nation? It sounds like a simple question, but it has challenged philosophers, historians, and citizens for generations. In 1882, during a lecture at the Sorbonne, French philosopher Ernest Renan proposed a definition that remains strikingly relevant. A nation, he said, is not built on race, language, or geography. It is sustained by a spiritual consensus, a shared belief that the sacrifices of the past and those yet to come are meaningful because they are made together. A nation, Renan argued, is a daily plebiscite, a constant reaffirmation of the desire to live, work, and dream as one community. It endures only so long as its people continue to believe in that shared story, the shared story that once defined America. Every nation has its binding myths, the collective narratives that turn millions of individuals into a single we. For the United States, that story was once rooted in the idea of American exceptionalism, the belief that anyone, regardless of origin, could find freedom, equality, and purpose under a common civic ideal. It was a story powerful enough to unite immigrants, bridge divides, and sustain optimism through crisis. It was, in essence, a social contract of belief, fragile, but deeply energizing. But in recent decades, those shared foundations have begun to erode. The rise of cultural relativism, the idea that all values and lifestyles deserve equal recognition, has made society more tolerant, yet also more fragmented. Moral clarity has given way to neutrality, conviction to caution. Silence and detachment have become the safest social positions. Without a shared moral compass, the national narrative fractures, replaced by countless, smaller, personalized stories. The age of personalized meaning. In today's hyper-connected, consumer-driven culture, meaning has become individualized. Identity is crafted through choice, through brands, platforms, and digital personas. Social media doesn't just connect people, it redefines who they think they are. Ironically, the very heart of this transformation, Silicon Valley, is both architect and mirror of this new reality. The platforms it created, from social networks to streaming services, were designed to empower expression and democratize communication. Yet in doing so, they also dissolved many of the collective narratives that once bound society together. As citizens turn inward toward personalization, algorithms, and digital tribes, the notion of common purpose begins to fade. And when a nation's story fractures, so too does its sense of direction in the world. Foreign policy as a mirror of identity. The internal always shapes the external. A country's foreign policy, its global ambitions, and even its alliances inevitably reflect the moral and cultural currents within it. For the United States, this means that the question of leadership abroad cannot be separated from the question of cohesion at home. If the American story is to remain compelling on the world stage, it must first be renewed within through a revived belief in civic responsibility, shared progress, and a sense of belonging that transcends ideology. In this renewal, technology's role is pivotal. It is no longer enough for innovation to serve markets. It must also serve meaning. With global reach and unmatched influence, centers of creativity like Silicon Valley can become forces for civic renewal, not just engines of profit. This is not a burden, it is an opportunity. The same platforms that have fragmented societies can also help reconnect them if guided by purpose. The Republic of Technology, a call to renewal. In the Technological Republic, Alexander C. Karp and Nicholas W. Zamiska trace how America once rose to global prominence through a partnership between innovation and public purpose. Technology, they remind us, was never just a market force. It was a civic act, an expression of national will. Today, the soul of a nation, like any living system, must be renewed daily, and in the 21st century, that renewal may depend less on flags and frontiers and more on the ethics of innovation, on how we choose to wield the power we have created. Technology is no longer just a mirror of progress. It is the medium through which we define what progress means. To lose control of it, morally or strategically, is to lose the story that binds us together. Nations are sustained not by borders, but by belief in who they are and what they stand for. Reading The Technological Republic felt less like going through a policy book and more like looking into a mirror reflecting the soul of our modern civilization. Alexander Karp and Nicholas Zamiska are not just discussing the relationship between Silicon Valley and the state, they are asking a deeper question. What kind of society are we becoming when innovation loses its moral compass? What struck me most was the tension they described. The same tools that empower humanity are slowly detaching from the values that once guided them. Technology today is borderless, fast, and immensely powerful. But power without shared purpose can become directionless. The authors remind us that the strength of a nation or any civilization does not lie in its algorithms or data centers, but in its capacity to align innovation with a collective vision of good. The book also challenges a comfortable illusion that technological progress is inherently positive. In reality, progress without responsibility can deepen division. When the brightest minds of our generation choose convenience apps over public purpose projects, we risk creating a world that is efficient but empty, connected yet fragmented. What I found most inspiring, however, is that the authors do not end in despair. Instead, they call for a moral renewal, a rediscovery of civic purpose within technology itself. They argue that innovation and responsibility are not opposites, but allies. It's a reminder that the future doesn't simply happen to us. It is something we shape, consciously or carelessly, with every line of code and every policy choice. Ultimately, the Technological Republic is a meditation on the balance between progress and purpose, a book that invites us to reimagine not just how technology works, but what it should work for. It left me asking myself, in the age of AI, who will defend the soul of our societies? And are we, the creators and users, ready to take on that responsibility?